Dr. Jim Stoppani's Uncut.
Hey guys, welcome to Jim Stoppani's Uncut podcast if you're listening in, or the Videocast if you're watching. I'm here with my co-host, Alicia Williams.
Hey Jim Army, it's Alencia, and you can look me up on Twitter at Alencia, or Facebook, The Tiger Trainer, and on IG, AT Space Williams.
So check her out. Today's topic, we're going to get into the myths of sodium, or if you want to call it just simply salt. So, I get so frustrated when I go to, especially like either Japanese or even a Chinese restaurant, and I sit down at the table and the only option is low sodium soy sauce. I'm like,
The only option?
The only
Really?
option in many restaurants, especially here,
That's just
especially here in LA.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And it really frustrates me because I don't want a low sodium soy sauce. There's no real discernible
I have
difference.
a question. So do they put something else in place of, how do they make it low sodium? Does it, like when they cut out fat, that means they add sugar.
Right.
But with
There's
sodium,
it's
is it
just-
okay
it's
to
just
do a low
it's
sodium?
just a lower sodium
Oh, okay.
count. So
I live in Koreatown, so they don't cut out any salt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here in LA proper where I am, there's a lot of only low sodium options. So and my concern is that people think that you need to follow a low sodium diet to be healthy.
Right.
And
Right.
it's actually quite the opposite, especially for people like us who train. Now, for those who don't know, the Institute of Medicine, or the IOM, basically is the institute that sets up dietary guidelines, like what's the recommended dose of vitamin B, how much selenium do you need in a day. Well, they've set the standard for how much sodium you should limit yourself to. And
Your MyFitnessPal automatically sets it at 2,300.
2,300, which is the standard, right?
Standard.
So you should shoot for less than 2,300 per day. Oh, that's my cell phone going off. So let's put that on quiet. So the Institute of Medicine has established sodium guidelines as 2,300 or less.
Right.
But then the American Heart Association recently changed their guidelines from the Institute of Medicine's 2,300 to 1,500 or less. Okay? Yeah. So what's really interesting about sodium from the standpoint is in a lot of the research that I did during my doctoral program was looking at sodium and fluid balance. So I understand the physiology of sodium and how critical it is, particularly for those who work out, those who train. So I'm a firm believer in making sure you get adequate amounts of sodium if you train, because we lose it when we sweat.
I sweat a lot.
Yes, so we need more. But also from the physiological standpoint of how critical sodium is in the body. Few people realize that for a muscle to contract, you have a change in the sodium and potassium concentration on the outside and inside of a muscle cell. That's how you create the impulse that causes a muscle to contract. So without adequate sodium, muscle contraction could actually be,
hindered. You cramp
exactly.
up.
And
So
you get a lot of people who say, I get a lot of muscle cramps when I'm training.
Right, or
And
you
that's the
have
first thing
competitors who are almost falling off, almost passing out, or
Right.
they cramp up, they're posing and they're,
Yeah,
and then they're limping back behind stage and they're saying, oh, it's because they, it's because they cut their sodium.
Exactly.
And now they're having, a rice
And
cake with no sodium.
Right. But a lot of people who are in fitness
Yeah.
try to not only cut out sodium for what they think is healthy, but because they want to look leaner. And it's actually, what I tell people is, it's quite the opposite. You would actually be better maintaining a higher sodium diet during when you're not competing
Okay.
and doing photo shoots, because
Even for
your
photo
body
shoots?
will
Okay.
when you're not,
When you're not,
right?
okay.
The rest,
Right.
because your body adapts to a certain amount of sodium.
Okay.
So,
That's true.
so if you, let's say you took someone who only had 1,000 milligrams of sodium a day, which is ridiculously low, right?
Yeah.
And they lived like that year round, okay?
Yeah.
Well, their body would adapt and they would hold the same amount of fluid under their skin as if they were eating 2,000 milligrams.
okay.
The body adapts.
Your body.
Yes. Only people who have issues, kidney issues.
Well, that's how it starts. We all we hear low fat,
Yeah,
low
right.
sugar, skip the sodium, but I think those standards are based on the obesity raising, the numbers of obesity raising in the country.
Yeah, I'm looking at the general
Yeah.
population.
So if you are one of those people who train and are trying to live a fit lifestyle, then you think, okay, I don't do any of that, I don't do any of that, and I only eat vegetables, and
Yeah, and I go
then
low
you
sodium.
realize then these different minerals, you just like sodium, you think that you're doing yourself a favor, or you think if you're a guy and you want to show that shredded six pack,
Yeah, right.
or a girl, she's like, oh, I don't want to hold a lot of water, so I'm going to avoid that because I'm wearing a halter top.
Yeah,
and anytime I would go
exactly,
for
right.
like Mexican, then I couldn't get rid of the snake, this big
Right.
baby I was having. So then you're just, afraid of sodium, but really I didn't realize until I did this competition and I had to think about, all the training that I was cramping up.
Yeah.
And then someone on Instagram posted some Himalayan salt she was using. I said, oh, I like to wash my salt. And she's like, no, girl, you need to
yeah.
get on this.
Exactly.
And so I
100%.
added it back to my diet. And then when I learned about, your article, I was reading your article about getting photo ready,
Yeah.
how you're supposed to start increasing your salt. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Right.
I'm afraid of salt.
Yeah,
but
that's
in
what many
order
people
for
are.
my body to get used to flushing that amount of salt out with the
Exactly.
water, then I would need to actually force myself to put it on things again.
Yep.
So I can relate to being taken in by the myth
By that, yeah.
that I thought I was doing my body a favor, but I was cramping up all the time.
Yep.
And maybe even as a kid, I was cramping up certain times when my diet was particularly low in sodium.
Yeah, sure, and
Yeah.
but a lot of people think, well, Jim, the government is recommending, and institutions
That's the
like the
whole
American
standard
Heart
of the
Association are
population, but not
recommending,
training
but it's like, well,
people.
let's go back to the 1980s when the government was recommending low-fat diets, and that fat was the devil.
Right.
They got it wrong once, doesn't mean they're not going to get it wrong again. Well, in the 1980s, they really promoted a very low-fat diet. They told you to be careful of nuts and avocados and fatty fish like salmon.
Yeah.
And now we know it's quite the
Your
opposite.
body
These are
doesn't
healthy
create, you
fats.
really need
These are
those
essential
healthy
fats that we're missing. So they had to reverse that and change those guidelines. And my prediction is we're going to see a change in sodium levels because they don't understand it from the physiological aspect. You can't, only about 20% of the population is really sodium sensitive. Okay, so
okay.
if you're that small part of the population, you have kidney issues, or you have a family history or your own history of blood pressure, then yes, eating lower sodium makes sense for you.
Well, we see it in our families. We had somebody with high blood pressure,
Yep.
and their spouse or grandpa, our grandmother was looking out for grandpa, and she would say, no salt for you, honey.
right.
And so we think, as young people, oh yeah, I need to also watch my salt, but even more so that I don't have grandpa's problems.
Right. And you're
But
not if you lead a healthy
it's
lifestyle.
about that balance of one thing that's really interesting is to hear that salt is not the same as sodium.
Correct, right.
So could you elaborate
Salt
about
is
that?
sodium
Yeah.
chloride. It's only about
Okay.
40% or so of sodium, the rest being chloride.
Because we use salt for seasoning.
Yeah, like table salt.
Yeah.
is
I used to
sodium
put it
chloride.
on the
It's
ends
not
of the
pure
bread
sodium.
when I was having pizza. And then I thought I was just overdoing it. But maybe what I was doing is getting my body used to a lot of salt. If
Which
I had
is
added a lot.
right, which is actually good for especially someone who trains hard.
How about, well, I wasn't training hard back then, but I wasn't
Okay,
eating
right.
a bunch of pizza. What
Well,
about
there you go, right.
if you're looking at the benefits of some product? I will usually look at the potassium and sodium ratio.
Mhm.
Is that a good gauge
So,
of
I
whether
mean,
it's
you know,
a
if you're
good
taking,
Because
Yeah, I mean-
potassium helps you release the water, sodium supposedly
yeah, I
makes
wouldn't,
you
you know,
hold.
I don't even worry about so much that. I think, you know, as long as you're getting, if you're eating a diet that's rich in vegetables and fruits,
Okay.
and you're taking like a proper multivitamin like Vitagen, you're getting adequate potassium. You don't have to worry about getting it from other foods based on the sodium. So that's not really much of a concern.
How about this? I was at one of my favorite, it's like a Japanese restaurant. The guy was saying, just drink a lot of water. So if you're eating a high sodium diet,
Mhm.
then just having a lot of water can help you flush that out.
Definitely.
So you
Well,
don't have to
right.
worry about it
But
being
you don't have to
held
worry.
up in your muscles.
Well, it's
or
even
making you
regardless
bloat.
of how much I mean, you should be drinking ample fluid anyway,
Okay.
you know?
Okay. That's
About
true.
a good gallon, I don't think most people
Some of
drink
us
that,
just
so-
don't get that thirsty. So when I had to raise it to
So you
like
have to sort of
a
monitor.
gallon and a half, I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
drink
it's a lot.
water.
But it's not all, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, even your coffee, your tea.
Oh, okay. So you can
you
still
know.
include that in your water?
Oh yeah, that's fluid, because most of that is.
Okay.
is
Well, I
just
have a
water.
lot of coffee.
So there you go. I think a lot of people don't know that. But when you actually look at the research on sodium, there's a lot of really interesting data. When you look at the research that looks at sodium intake in cardiovascular disease, out of about a dozen studies, only around 4 have actually shown an association between sodium and cardiovascular disease. The others saw no association between sodium intake and cardiovascular disease. Now, the University of California, Davis has done a lot of research on sodium intake over different populations. They did a study on over 30 countries, and they looked at people's sodium intake.
Okay.
And what they found was that regardless of where they lived, regardless of the cultural influence, the types of food that they, you know, obviously someone in China is going to follow a different diet than someone in America.
Right.
Someone in Mexico is going to follow a different diet than someone in
Right.
America. China. Regardless of where they lived,
Uh-huh.
sodium intake was pretty steady at around 2,700 milligrams.
Oh, okay.
Regardless of how they ate.
Oh.
And you know, the UC Davis researchers firmly believe that we seek sodium because it's so important from a physiological standpoint.
Okay.
We need. And when you look, there was a study where they tried to put people on an 1,800 milligram diet. Literally, not a single person in the study was able to maintain 1,800 milligrams. The lowest they were able to get down to was 2,300, and the average was 2,700, which is the same as the UC Davis people found from country to country. About 2,700 milligrams was. So it's literally impossible to get people to eat a low sodium diet because the body needs it and seeks it out. And it sort of, waves a red flag to, all this, nonsense about, look, we all need to cut sodium, but we need it,
Sodium or salt, so it's not sodium, but has been used as a preservative for so many diets. So it's almost like we
Centuries
can't
and
help
centuries.
but have sodium in any of the foods. I mean, just for their own stability.
Right.
Then just preserving them for those populations, then they used salt to keep them good. Everything in the middle of the store can be very high sodium.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's just picking, should you worry about any sodium, or is there a limit? If you were following MyFitness, or using MyFitnessPal as a guide, how would you know that you've exceeded the amount of sodium that's good for you? Or are you saying that if you're already used to a
It's
lot,
pretty hard
then
to
it's good?
exceed. What the research shows and what I've seen is that the sweet spot is between like 2,000 and 4,000 milligrams. And what the research has shown is that if you consume less than 2,000 milligrams, there's actually a higher risk of cardiovascular disease with very low sodium diets.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a few theories on why, and one is to do with angiotensin, which is a hormone that your body releases to constrict blood vessels, which can cause hardening of the arteries. So if you're eating a constantly low sodium diet, you have your blood pressure drops.
Right.
Okay, because sodium, physiologically speaking, sodium in the bloodstream pulls water into your blood vessels.
Okay.
Okay, wherever sodium is, water follows. Okay, so you need sodium, adequate amounts of sodium in your bloodstream to maintain enough water to maintain blood pressure. If you don't have enough sodium, you don't have enough water in the blood, and your blood volume's down, your blood pressure drops. Then you release this hormone to increase your blood pressure, to constrict those blood vessels. Over time, that can be problematic because it can lead to hardening of the arteries.
So you do need to get your body used to salt. If you thought you were doing it to be healthy, you could be at such an extreme that you're
unhealthy.
almost like
Yeah.
bringing on your own diabetes, the diabetes type 2 that we can be
Yeah,
responsible for.
right.
That's another extreme.
Well, speaking of
Of-
diabetes,
yeah.
sodium is related to insulin sensitivity.
That's
And
right.
low sodium can decrease insulin sensitivity, meaning your body has to put out more insulin to get the same
Oh.
effect.
Yeah.
So, and if you're someone who's taking creatine, and most of you guys should be, there was a study done where they put subjects on a low sodium diet, and they found that creatine uptake by the muscles was decreased by 80%. So they basically weren't absorbing adequate amounts of creatine that they were taking, which hinders your performance. So
are you
sodium
saying, go
is
ahead.
very, very much essential for those who train for a number of reasons.
So are you saying that maybe you're more, and forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, you're more carb sensitive, like you puff up at carbs because maybe you're always so low sodium that now you're just not able to lose the same. I mean, because
Well,
in
yeah, there's
Japan,
no real-
when I lived in
right,
Japan,
yeah.
I had no fear of sodium. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
just they didn't have the low sodium like we would in
Right,
West
exactly,
Hollywood. You know,
yes, yeah.
so I didn't ever fear sodium so much, but now that you just get bombarded by all these fitness magazines that you're reading and different articles that you think and they're not necessarily backed by the latest fitness science.
Right.
They weren't written by Jim Spock.
That's for sure.
They just put it on a lot of the ads for food, low sodium,
Right,
and you
yeah.
go, yeah, I'm doing
Right,
the
yeah,
right
this is
thing.
healthy for
And
me.
so just like getting used to, or I'm still telling people to, don't worry about if it's real milk, good fat.
Yeah,
Your mom
exactly.
drank it.
That's-
It's safe.
Especially if it's organic.
Right.
and more
Don't worry
omega-3
about
fats,
fat.
yeah.
And it says low fat cookies.
You
That
probably wanna-
sugar's gonna turn
yeah.
into fat.
You probably want to
So-
avoid that.
Right.
yeah.
You wanna have the real thing.
Exactly.
But I think that kind of thinking probably made even myself a little bit more carb sensitive, where I wasn't afraid of fruit and certain breads. Just I had a moderate amount of my diet, where I think that after a while I got so like, oh, I'm gonna follow this so like cleanly,
Yeah.
that I think that it only made me more sensitive to carbs than I needed to be. And I think that
Possibly.
could be, I mean, I'm
Due to
just
the
trying to
insulin.
self-diagnose
Right.
here.
No,
but,
it's pretty interesting
yeah.
perspective. I mean, there's no real hard data on that, but it's an interesting perspective when you really think about the relationship between insulin and sodium and how important
Don't
it
be
is.
afraid of sodium.
Yeah, definitely don't be afraid of sodium. Like you were saying, how do you know if you're eating too much? You're saying those aisles in the middle of the grocery store, supermarket, whatever you call it, based
Yeah.
on the region you live in. On the East Coast, we call it
Store.
supermarket, store,
go to the store.
grocery store. Here, I think they say market on the West Coast. So, those, like you said, but those are processed foods that you probably don't want to be eating, not just for the sodium, but for other reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The
Anyway.
long list of
So if you're eating
items that
a,
they
you know, if you're like following one of my diets, you don't even have to worry about your sodium because typically my diets land right in that like sweet spot that I'm talking about. That you know, somewhere.
It's better if you add your own sodium in some cases.
Sometimes, yeah, you know the
What
other.
about like the frozen food aisle? Because people do want to make their food happen fast, so
Right.
they'll have a bunch of frozen food. Now that, because salt is a preservative,
Sure.
now adds a lot of sodium.
It does, but it wouldn't be something I'd be concerned with. Like I said, you know,
Okay.
you can go up to 4,000 in some cases, they've shown that up to 9,000 milligrams had no negative impact on cardiovascular.
Oh.
So
okay.
it's
what you get your body used to.
exactly because that's what you know.
Okay.
Your body regulates sodium and fluid on a daily basis.
Because
Like,
lean
it's-
cuisine would say, 380, and Hungry Man would say 9,000,
Right.
or a chili will be like
Exactly.
that. And I'm like, should I eat this chili because there's so much salt in
Yeah,
there?
well, I mean,
But-
one frozen meal is not going to
Yeah.
destroy. I mean, if you're eating your entire day's worth of meals, that's a problem not for sodium, for other reasons.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's those habits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that
So
perpetuate.
if you're following one of my diets, you really don't need to be concerned with sodium. It's critical for those who train. It's critical for those who supplement with creatine, and you guys all know that you should be supplementing with creatine. It's important for your health. It's actually healthy to be getting adequate amounts of sodium. And like I said, athletes lose it in their sweat. So we're losing more. We need more. And your body regulates it on a daily basis. Unless you have kidney issues, and most
Okay.
of us do not,
Right.
our body's going to regulate through the kidneys our fluid and our sodium levels. That's what it does.
Yeah, I think it's important not to compare yourself with someone else's special needs. So if someone
Exactly.
is saying, well, he needs to watch his sodium, well, we all don't want to be that extreme person, maybe. But I think sometimes we look at somebody who we feel is so fit, so great, and we think, okay, I want to look like them, and they're telling this person to stay away from sodium, so I'm going to stay away from sodium. So that was a wrong conclusion to draw
Exactly.
from that.
Right.
So if somebody has to watch their fat, maybe they have to watch their fat. But you have to look at what you're doing to create the body that you have.
Precisely. Yeah.
And that's where you can see where there might be too many fats or too many carbs or, not enough protein in your diet. I'm always surprised when I was very surprised when I saw how little protein I was getting at one point in my dieting.
Yep.
And I thought I was on the right track, but I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So I think that
Yeah.
increased.
And
Just having some log every once in a while.
exactly to sort of
Yeah.
get a snapshot of your diet
Yeah.
and
Snapshot.
break it down.
And see how much
It doesn't mean
sodium
have
are
to-
you taking
you
in,
have
or
to calculate
yeah.
it every single day.
Yeah.
But once you sort of get a feel for what you're eating, then you can sort of run with it because you kind of know where you're hitting on this protein intake
Right.
and whatnot. But as far as sodium, really, from my perspective, and like I say, I'm one of the few people in the industry that actually has a background studying sodium and fluid intake. Sodium isn't even a nutrition question. A lot of people think about it from a nutrition standpoint. It's physiology because it's how it works in the body from a physiological standpoint. It's not even a question of nutrition. It's really, like I said, it's so critical in the functions that it performs in the body that's really physiology. And like I said, if you work out, especially in the summer, in the warmer months, you definitely need to get more sodium, at least than what the Institute of Medicine is recommending, and especially what the American Heart Association is recommending.
Well, now would you say that people in warmer climates like Dallas right now, they're hot?
Yeah, so there's...
Well, I don't know right now, but
Yeah, well,
when they get hot,
it's been warm here in LA,
Yeah.
Unseasonably warm for March.
Yeah.
We've had 90-degree temperatures.
I almost thought it was summer.
Yeah,
I'm thinking,
it feels like
yeah,
summer.
for Dallas people at the summertime, it's
Yep.
hard for them to go out because it's just so humid. So maybe they could use a little bit extra salt.
Definitely,
too.
without a doubt. They should
Yeah.
not be monitoring salt and worrying about it so much.
Yeah.
So basically, to sort of sum it all up, most people do not need to worry about sodium intake.
Put some salt on your popcorn. It's
Yeah.
safe.
Exactly.
Safe to come
And one of
outside.
the other things, just real quickly, I was going to
Yeah.
say was that, a lot of people who've stopped using salt from the salt shaker, they're actually losing out on iodine, which is a critical
Another mineral that's very
mineral
important.
that's very important for thyroid health and other reasons.
Ah,
And there's actually,
see.
since we've changed the guidelines, or at least the Institute of Medicine and American Heart Association, the research has shown that iodine levels have decreased, which is not a good thing, which can lead to metabolic issues, low
Right.
metabolism.
That's what's creating these standards.
because that's where most
they're
people-
looking at
most
those
people-
people who don't exercise, those people who don't, who have let those parts of their makeup go out of control. So,
Yeah.
but if you are training and you are following a good nutritional program, then it's so important to make sure you're getting the right nutrients for that.
And you don't even need, like I said, you don't even have to worry. If you're following a proper diet, it's very unlikely that you're getting too little or too much sodium. You're probably right in the sweet spot. So basically, my
Right.
message for everyone out there is just don't even worry about it. Drink plenty of fluid, and
So no more going out to a restaurant and worrying about the sauce.
exactly, precisely. So.
That's nice.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that topic on sodium. I hope you learned something new. I hope you took a new perspective home to think about in regards to your own diet. And remember to look for more of my podcasts, Jim Stoppani's Uncut, as well as you can watch the video version on YouTube. So thank you guys for tuning in.